Cat trapped in delivery truck for 3 weeks. What happens next shocks everyone. Mrs. Eleanor Ainsworth's house, nestled on a quiet, tree-lined street in suburban Portland, Oregon, was a haven of tranquility. Sunlight streamed through the bay windows of the living room, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and warming the plush, floral-patterned rug. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the old oak tree outside, its branches providing dappled shade for the porch swing where Mrs. Ainsworth often sat with a cup of tea and a good book. But the true heart of the home, the furry embodiment of contentment, was Clementine, a calico cat of discerning taste and impeccable grooming. Clementine, with her patchwork coat of orange, black, and white, was the picture of feline elegance. She had the kind of quiet dignity that only a cat who knows she is adored can possess. Her emerald green eyes, bright and intelligent, surveyed her domain with a calm assurance. She knew every nook and cranny of the house, every sunbeam that graced the carpet, every comfortable cushion on the sofa. Her days unfolded in a predictable rhythm of naps, gentle stretches, and the occasional playful swat at a dangling toy. Mrs. Ainsworth, a widow with a heart as warm as her smile, cherished Clementine's companionship. The cat was more than just a pet. She was a confidant, a silent listener to Mrs. Ainsworth's stories and musings. Their days were spent in comfortable companionship. Mornings began with a shared breakfast, Mrs. Ainsworth with her toast and jam, Clementine with a small dish of salmon-flavored kibble. Afternoons were for leisurely strolls in the garden, Clementine padding silently at Mrs. Ainsworth's heels, pausing to sniff at fragrant roses or chase after errant butterflies. Evenings were reserved for quiet moments by the fireplace, Mrs. Ainsworth knitting while Clementine purred contentedly on her lap. Clementine's life was one of comfort and routine, a gentle rhythm punctuated by the soft chime of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the distant hum of traffic on the main road. She knew the precise moment Mrs. Ainsworth would reach for her favorite lavender-scented hand lotion. Clementine adored the smell, and she would appear at her side, ready for a gentle massage on her velvety head. She knew the sound of the mail carrier's truck and would position herself by the front window, tail twitching with anticipation, hoping to catch a glimpse of a particularly plump robin hopping across the lawn. One of Clementine's favorite parts of the day was when young Timmy, the grandson of Mrs. Ainsworth's neighbor, came to visit. Timmy, a bright-eyed boy of 8 with a mop of sandy blonde hair, was Clementine's biggest fan. He would often bring his golden retriever, Barnaby, with him. Barnaby, a gentle giant with a perpetually wagging tail, was Clementine's unlikely friend. Despite their species difference, they shared a bond of playful affection. They would chase each other around the garden, Barnaby's happy barks mingling with Clementine's playful hisses. They would curl up together under the shade of the old oak tree, Barnaby's warm fur a comforting presence against Clementine's sleek coat. Life was good for Clementine. She had a warm home, a loving owner, and a best friend. She had no reason to believe that her comfortable world was about to be turned upside down, that a simple act of curiosity would lead her on an unexpected journey far from the familiar comforts of home. The late summer sun cast long shadows across Mrs. Ainsworth's garden, painting the vibrant hues of the flower beds in softer, golden tones. Clementine, having enjoyed a particularly satisfying nap in a sunbeam, stretched luxuriously, extending each paw in turn before arching her back in a graceful curve. She then proceeded to groom herself meticulously, licking her paws and smoothing her fur until it gleamed like polished silk. Satisfied with her toilette, she sauntered towards the open back door, her tail held high, ready to explore the late afternoon scents drifting on the gentle breeze. Today, however, there was a new and intriguing aroma in the air, a mixture of cardboard, packing peanuts, and something vaguely sweet that tickled Clementine's whiskers. A large delivery truck, emblazoned with the logo of Artisan Goods of the Pacific Northwest, was parked in Mrs. Ainsworth's driveway. A young man with a neatly trimmed beard and rolled-up sleeves was unloading a large, rectangular package from the back of the truck. Clementine watched with mild curiosity as the driver struggled to maneuver the heavy box onto a hand truck. She had seen delivery trucks come and go before, bringing Mrs. Ainsworth's gardening supplies or the occasional online purchase. But this delivery seemed different, more intriguing. The sweet scent emanating from the truck was particularly captivating. As the driver wrestled with the package, he momentarily left the back of the truck open. It was a fleeting opportunity, a mere sliver of a moment, but for Clementine, it was an irresistible invitation. The sweet scent wafting from within the truck was now stronger, more enticing. Her curiosity, that inherent feline trait that had led countless cats into countless adventures, got the better of her. She hesitated for only a second, her emerald eyes scanning the surroundings. Mrs. Ainsworth was inside the house, humming softly as she prepared her afternoon tea. Timmy and Barnaby were nowhere to be seen. They had gone home after an afternoon of boisterous play. The coast was clear. With a lithe, silent movement, Clementine slipped inside the open back of the truck. The interior was dimly lit, the air thick with the mingled scents of cardboard, paper, and the tantalizingly sweet aroma that had lured her in. She found herself surrounded by stacks of boxes, each labeled with unfamiliar words and intricate designs. The sweet smell seemed to be coming from one particular stack, near the back of the truck. Driven by an insatiable curiosity, Clementine began to navigate the maze of boxes. She squeezed through narrow gaps, her whiskers twitching as they brushed against the rough cardboard. She climbed over stacks of packages, her paws patting softly on the uneven surfaces. The sweet scent grew stronger with each step, drawing her deeper into the labyrinth of the truck's interior. Finally, she reached the stack of boxes that seemed to be the source of the captivating aroma. They were smaller than the other boxes, neatly wrapped in colorful paper and tied with elegant ribbons. Clementine sniffed at the boxes, her nose twitching with delight. The sweet scent was now almost overwhelming, a mixture of fruit, spices, and something subtly floral. Lost in her exploration, Clementine didn't notice the driver returning to the truck. He had finally managed to maneuver the large package onto the hand truck and was now ready to close up the back of the vehicle. He glanced inside, but the dim light and the jumble of boxes obscured Clementine's small form. Satisfied that everything was in order, he closed the doors with a resounding clang, sealing Clementine inside. The truck rumbled to life, the engine's low growl vibrating through the floorboards. Clementine, startled by the sudden noise and movement, instinctively crouched down, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea where the truck was going, or how long she would be trapped inside. All she knew was that her curiosity had led her into an unexpected and potentially perilous adventure, far from the familiar comforts of Mrs. Ainsworth's home. The truck lurched forward, its massive wheels rumbling against the asphalt, sending vibrations through Clementine's small body. She huddled behind a stack of boxes, her emerald eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. The sweet scent that had initially lured her into the truck now seemed less enticing, replaced by the unsettling aroma of diesel fumes and the claustrophobic feeling of being enclosed in a moving metal box. The journey began as a series of unsettling bumps and turns, the truck navigating the city streets before merging onto a larger highway. Clementine, disoriented and frightened, tried to find a comfortable spot among the boxes, but the constant movement made it difficult to maintain her balance. She was tossed from side to side, her paws slipping on the slick cardboard. As the hours passed, the initial fear began to give way to a gnawing hunger. Clementine's stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since her morning kibble. She sniffed at the boxes around her, hoping to find a stray crumb or a forgotten treat, but the only scent she could detect was the faint aroma of the sweet-smelling packages, now tinged with the unpleasant odor of the truck's interior. Thirst soon followed hunger. Clementine's tongue felt dry and scratchy, and she longed for a cool drink of water. She remembered the small dish of water that Mrs. Ainsworth always kept filled for her, the refreshing coolness of it against her parched throat. She searched the truck for any sign of moisture, but the boxes were dry and the air was still and stale. The temperature inside the truck fluctuated wildly. During the day, the sun beat down on the metal roof, turning the interior into a sweltering oven. Clementine sought refuge in the shadows cast by the stacks of boxes, trying to find a patch of cooler air. At night, the temperature plummeted, and the truck became a frigid box. Clementine shivered, her fur providing little insulation against the biting cold. The journey stretched on, seemingly without end. Clementine lost track of time, her days and nights blurring into a monotonous cycle of hunger, thirst, and discomfort. She huddled in the back of the truck, her body aching, her spirit weary. She missed Mrs. Ainsworth's warm lap, the gentle strokes of her hand, the comforting sound of her voice. She missed Barnaby's playful barks and the warmth of his fur against hers. She longed for the familiar comforts of her home, the sunbeams on the carpet, the scent of lavender hand lotion. Despite the hardships, Clementine's instincts for survival kicked in. She remembered the lessons her mother had taught her about finding food and water in the wild, about conserving energy and staying hidden from predators. She began to explore the truck more systematically, searching for any possible source of sustenance. She discovered that some of the boxes contained small packets of dried fruit and nuts, intended as samples for the artisan goods store. With her sharp claws, she managed to tear open a few of the packets, nibbling on the dried fruit and licking up any condensation that had formed on the inside of the packaging. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep her alive. The journey was a test of Clementine's endurance, a trial by ordeal that pushed her to her limits. She faced hunger, thirst, extreme temperatures, and the constant discomfort of being trapped in a moving vehicle. But through it all, she clung to the hope of rescue, the belief that somehow she would find her way back home. Her resilience, her innate feline tenacity, would be her salvation. 3 weeks had passed since Clementine had inadvertently embarked on her cross-country odyssey. The truck, a rolling metal box that had become her prison and her refuge, finally slowed, its rumbling engine quieting to a gentle purr. Clementine, curled up behind a stack of boxes, her body thin and her fur dull, barely registered the change. She had grown accustomed to the constant motion, the swaying and bumping that had become the soundtrack of her captivity. The truck came to a complete stop. Clementine, roused from her semi-slumber, cautiously peeked out from behind the boxes. The dim light of the truck's interior was suddenly replaced by a brighter, warmer glow. She could hear voices, unfamiliar human voices, speaking in a language she didn't understand. The back doors of the truck swung open, flooding the interior with sunlight and fresh air. Clementine, blinking against the sudden brightness, instinctively retreated further into the shadows. She was wary of the humans, unsure of their intentions. 2 men in work clothes approached the truck, their voices growing louder as they neared. They began unloading the boxes, their movements quick and efficient. Clementine watched them, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that her hiding place had been compromised, that it was only a matter of time before she was discovered. As the men cleared away the boxes, Clementine became more visible. One of the men, a burly fellow with a thick mustache, suddenly stopped, his eyes widening in surprise. "Well, look what we have here," he exclaimed, pointing towards Clementine. The other man, younger and slimmer, peered into the truck. "A cat," he said, his voice laced with disbelief. "How did a cat get in here?" Clementine, cornered and exposed, braced herself for the unknown. She didn't know what these humans would do to her. Would they be kind? Would they be angry? All she knew was that her long and arduous journey was about to take another unexpected turn. The men approached Clementine cautiously, speaking to her in soft, soothing voices. Clementine, sensing no immediate threat, remained still, her eyes fixed on the men's faces. She was too weak and exhausted to run, too drained to put up a fight. The burly man reached out a hand towards Clementine, slowly and gently. Clementine flinched, but didn't move. She had been through so much, endured so many hardships, that she had little strength left to resist. The man gently stroked Clementine's head, his touch surprisingly gentle. Clementine, surprised by the kindness, allowed him to pet her. She had expected anger, perhaps even cruelty, but instead, she was met with a gentle touch and a kind voice. The men carefully lifted Clementine out of the truck, placing her on the ground. She stood there for a moment, unsteady on her paws, blinking in the bright sunlight. She looked around at her surroundings, taking in the unfamiliar sights and smells. She was in a small town, surrounded by low buildings and towering trees. The air was dry and warm, a stark contrast to the humid climate of Portland. The men brought Clementine inside a nearby building, a small general store with a sign that read Martha's Mercantile. Inside, the store was cool and inviting, filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread and fragrant spices. A woman with a warm smile and kind eyes greeted the men. "What have you found?" she asked. "A stowaway," the burly man replied, holding up Clementine. She was in the back of the truck. The woman gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Akat?" All the way from Portland. The men explained how they had found Clementine, weak and dehydrated, but alive. The woman, whose name was Martha, was immediately touched by Clementine's plight. She took the cat into her arms, cradling her gently. "Poor thing," she murmured. "You must be exhausted." Martha took Clementine to the back of the store, where she had a small office. She gave Clementine fresh water and a small dish of tuna. Clementine, ravenously hungry, devoured the tuna in a few bites. She drank the water deeply, her parched throat finally quenched. Martha watched Clementine, her heart filled with compassion. She knew that this cat had been through a terrible ordeal, but she also knew that she would do everything in her power to help her recover. Clementine, after weeks of hardship and uncertainty, had finally found a safe haven, a place where she could rest, recover, and perhaps find a new beginning. Martha's Mercantile, a hub of community life in the small Arizona town, became Clementine's unexpected sanctuary. The store, with its creaking wooden floors, shelves overflowing with goods, and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee, was a world away from the cold, metal confines of the delivery truck. But more importantly, it was a place filled with warmth, kindness, and the genuine compassion of strangers. Martha, the store's owner and the heart of the community, took Clementine under her wing. She set up a soft bed for her in her office, a cozy corner filled with blankets and cushions. She made sure Clementine always had fresh water and plenty of food, offering her small portions of tuna, chicken, and even the occasional treat of salmon. News of the miracle cat spread quickly through the town. People came to Martha's Mercantile specifically to see Clementine, to marvel at her resilience and to offer their well wishes. Children would stop by after school to gently pet her, their eyes wide with wonder. Older folks, touched by her story, would share their own tales of animal companions and the comfort they brought. Clementine, initially wary and withdrawn, slowly began to respond to the kindness she was shown. She would purr softly as Martha stroked her fur, her emerald eyes softening with gratitude. She would cautiously venture out of her office, exploring the store, sniffing at the various items on the shelves, and even deigning to rub against the legs of some of the friendlier customers. The townsfolk, in turn, embraced Clementine as one of their own. They brought her toys, blankets, and even small gifts of catnip. They shared stories of their own pets, their voices filled with affection and love. Clementine, it seemed, had become a symbol of hope, a reminder of the resilience of life and the power of kindness. Martha, with her warm heart and practical nature, became Clementine's primary caregiver. She would spend hours talking to her, telling her stories about the town and its people. She would brush Clementine's fur, gently removing the mats and tangles that had accumulated during her long journey. She would even sing to her, soft lullabies that seemed to soothe Clementine's weary spirit. One evening, as Martha was closing up the store, a young girl named Lily came in with her father. Lily, a shy and gentle child with bright blue eyes, had heard about Clementine and was eager to meet her. Martha brought Clementine out, and Lily's face lit up with joy. She knelt down and gently extended her hand towards Clementine. Clementine, sensing Lily's gentle nature, approached her cautiously. She sniffed at Lily's hand, then rubbed her head against her leg. Lily giggled, her heart filled with happiness. She spent the next half hour playing with Clementine, tossing a small toy mouse for her to chase. As Lily and her father were leaving, Lily turned to Martha, her eyes shining with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Clementine is so special." Martha smiled. "She is," she replied. "She's a survivor." Clementine's time at Martha's Mercantile was a period of healing and recovery. She regained her strength. Her fur grew back thicker and glossier, and her eyes regained their sparkle. She learned to trust humans again, to accept their kindness and to reciprocate their affection. She had found a temporary home, a place where she was loved and cherished. But deep inside, a part of her still longed for the familiar comforts of her life with Mrs. Ainsworth, the warmth of her lap, the sound of her voice. The pull of home, the yearning for the familiar, was a constant undercurrent in her heart. Life at Martha's Mercantile was comfortable, a haven of warmth and kindness in the heart of the Arizona desert. Clementine had found food, shelter, and affection, things she had desperately craved during her arduous journey. She had bonded with Martha, enjoying her gentle touch and the soothing rhythm of her voice. She had even made friends with some of the regulars at the store, the children who stopped by after school, the elderly couples who shared stories of their own animal companions. Yet, despite the comfort and affection she received, a part of Clementine remained restless, a deep longing tugging at her heart. She would often find herself gazing out the window of Martha's office, her emerald eyes fixed on the distant horizon, a vast expanse of desert landscape that stretched as far as the eye could see. She would remember the lush greenery of Portland, the towering trees, the vibrant flower gardens, the gentle rain that nourished the earth. She missed Mrs. Ainsworth. She missed the warmth of her lap, the soft strokes of her hand on her fur, the gentle murmur of her voice as she read her books or knitted by the fireplace. She missed the familiar scent of lavender hand lotion, the comforting sound of the grandfather clock chiming in the hallway. She missed the routine of her days, the predictable rhythm of her life in Portland. She remembered Barnaby, her golden retriever friend, the playful chases in the garden, the warmth of his fur against hers as they curled up together under the shade of the old oak tree. She missed his happy barks, his goofy grin, the way he would always greet her with a wagging tail and a wet-nosed nudge. The memories of her life in Portland were vivid and clear, etched into her mind like cherished photographs. She remembered the sunbeams that warmed her fur as she napped by the window, the butterflies she chased in the garden, the birds that sang in the trees outside her window. She would often dream of Portland, of Mrs. Ainsworth's house, of the familiar smells and sounds that had once been her world. She would wake up with a start, her heart pounding, a sense of longing so intense that it ached in her chest. Martha, noticing Clementine's restlessness, would often try to comfort her. She would pick her up and hold her close, stroking her fur and whispering soothing words. "I know you miss your home, little one," she would say, "but you're safe here. You're loved here." Clementine would purr in response, grateful for Martha's kindness, but the longing for home remained, a constant ache in her heart. She was a survivor, a resilient cat who had endured a long and arduous journey. She had found kindness and comfort in a strange and unfamiliar place. But her heart belonged in Portland, with Mrs. Ainsworth, with Barnaby, with the life she had known and loved. One day, as Clementine was gazing out the window, a newspaper caught her eye. It was lying on Martha's desk, open to a page with a picture of a calico cat. Clementine's heart skipped a beat. The cat in the picture looked remarkably like her. Martha, noticing Clementine's interest, picked up the newspaper. She read the article aloud. It was a story about a missing cat, a calico named Clementine, who had disappeared from her home in Portland 3 weeks ago. Her owner, an elderly woman named Eleanor Ainsworth, was heartbroken and desperate to find her. Clementine's ears perked up. Eleanor Ainsworth. The name sounded familiar. She remembered a gentle voice, a warm lap, a soft hand stroking her fur. Could it be? Could this be her Mrs. Ainsworth? A wave of hope washed over Clementine. She knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within her soul, that this was her chance to go home, her chance to be reunited with the woman she loved, her chance to return to the life she had left behind. Martha, her voice trembling slightly, finished reading the article. She looked at Clementine, her eyes filled with tears. "Clementine?" she whispered. "Is this you?" Clementine, her heart pounding with excitement, meowed loudly, a sound filled with urgency and recognition. She rubbed against Martha's legs, purring with all her might. She knew instinctively that this was the moment she had been waiting for. Martha, convinced that Clementine was indeed the missing cat, immediately contacted the number listed in the article. She spoke to a woman, her voice choked with emotion, and described Clementine in detail. The woman on the other end of the line, Mrs. Eleanor Ainsworth, listened intently, her heart filled with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Mrs. Ainsworth had never given up hope of finding Clementine. She had searched for her everywhere, putting up posters, contacting local shelters, and even hiring a pet detective. She had spent countless nights worrying about her beloved companion, wondering if she was safe, if she was warm, if she was fed. When Martha described the calico cat with the emerald green eyes, the cat who had been found in a delivery truck all the way from Portland, Mrs. Ainsworth knew in her heart that it was Clementine. A wave of relief washed over her, so intense that she almost collapsed. Arrangements were made for Clementine to be flown back to Portland. Martha, though sad to see Clementine go, knew that it was the right thing to do. She packed a small bag for Clementine, filled with her favorite toys, a soft blanket, and a note for Mrs. Ainsworth. The day of Clementine's departure arrived. Martha drove her to the local airport, where she was placed in a special carrier for the flight. Martha hugged Clementine tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Be a good girl," she whispered, "and give Mrs. Ainsworth my love." Clementine, sensing Martha's sadness, rubbed against her cheek, purring softly. She knew she would miss Martha, her kindness, her warmth, the safe haven she had provided. But the pull of home, the longing for Mrs. Ainsworth, was too strong to resist. The flight to Portland was long and uneventful. Clementine, nestled in her carrier, thought about Mrs. Ainsworth, about Barnaby, about the life she had left behind. She imagined the moment of their reunion, the joy in Mrs. Ainsworth's eyes, the warmth of her embrace. Finally, the plane landed in Portland. Clementine, her heart pounding with anticipation, was taken off the plane and brought to the baggage claim area. And there, waiting for her, was Mrs. Ainsworth. Mrs. Ainsworth, her face etched with worry and relief, saw Clementine's carrier and rushed towards it. She opened the carrier and gently lifted Clementine into her arms. "Clementine!" she cried, her voice choked with tears. "You're home." Clementine, recognizing Mrs. Ainsworth's voice, her scent, the warmth of her embrace, began to purr uncontrollably. She rubbed against Mrs. Ainsworth's face, her body trembling with joy. She was home. She was finally home. The reunion was a tearful and joyous one. Mrs. Ainsworth held Clementine close, showering her with kisses and hugs. She couldn't believe that her beloved companion had returned, safe and sound. Timmy and Barnaby were also there to welcome Clementine home. Barnaby, wagging his tail furiously, barked happily as he saw Clementine. He nudged her gently with his nose, welcoming her back to their playful games in the garden. Clementine, surrounded by the love of Mrs. Ainsworth, Timmy, and Barnaby, felt a sense of peace and contentment she hadn't felt in weeks. She was home. She was loved. She was safe. Her long and arduous journey had finally come to an end. Clementine's return to Mrs. Ainsworth's house was a homecoming in every sense of the word. The familiar scent of lavender and old books, the soft chime of the grandfather clock, the sunbeams that warmed the living room carpet, all these things welcomed her back like old friends. She explored every nook and cranny of the house, reacquainting herself with her favorite napping spots, her scratching post, and the window perch where she loved to watch the birds flitting in the oak tree outside. Life resumed its gentle rhythm, a comforting routine that Clementine had missed during her long absence. Mornings began with shared breakfasts, Mrs. Ainsworth with her toast and jam, Clementine with her salmon-flavored kibble. Afternoons were for leisurely strolls in the garden, Clementine padding silently at Mrs. Ainsworth's heels, sniffing at the fragrant roses and chasing after errant butterflies. Evenings were reserved for quiet moments by the fireplace, Mrs. Ainsworth knitting while Clementine purred contentedly on her lap. But Clementine's adventure had changed her. She was no longer the same pampered house cat who had innocently wandered into the delivery truck. She had seen the world beyond the quiet streets of Portland, had faced hardship and hunger, had experienced both fear and kindness. She had learned the true meaning of resilience, the strength it took to survive against the odds. She was more appreciative of her comfortable life, more grateful for the love and care she received from Mrs. Ainsworth. She seemed to cherish every moment, every gentle stroke, every soft word. She would often curl up on Mrs. Ainsworth's lap, purring contentedly, her emerald eyes filled with a deep sense of peace. Her bond with Barnaby, the golden retriever, had also deepened. They would still chase each other around the garden, their playful barks and meows echoing through the neighborhood. But there was a new tenderness in their interactions, a shared understanding of the journey Clementine had taken. They would often curl up together under the shade of the old oak tree, Barnaby's warm fur a comforting presence against Clementine's sleek coat. Mrs. Ainsworth, too, had been changed by Clementine's disappearance and return. She had realized how much Clementine meant to her, how empty her life would be without her. She cherished their time together even more, appreciating the simple moments of companionship, the silent understanding that passed between them. One sunny afternoon, as Mrs. Ainsworth was sitting on the porch swing, reading a book, Clementine jumped onto her lap, purring softly. Mrs. Ainsworth stroked Clementine's fur, her heart filled with love and gratitude. She thought about Clementine's incredible journey, the challenges she had overcome, the kindness she had encountered. She realized that Clementine's story was more than just a tale of survival. It was a story about the enduring power of love, the resilience of the spirit, and the kindness of strangers. It was a story that reminded her of the importance of cherishing every moment, of appreciating the simple joys of life, and of never giving up hope. Clementine, nestled in Mrs. Ainsworth's lap, felt a deep sense of contentment. She was home. She was loved. She was safe. Her adventure had come to an end, but her new beginning was just beginning. She had returned not just as a cat, but as a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, love and kindness can always prevail. And as she purred softly, she knew that she would never take her comfortable life, her loving owner, or her playful friend for granted again. She was home, and she was finally at peace.
Gas station man shares a meal with a stray cat. Until one cold night, its actions surprised the whole gas station. Why would a shy, stray cat suddenly cause chaos inside a gas station on a freezing night? Just when it seems like a simple case of a cat sensing fire, a shocking twist reveals the true reason behind the flames and why only the cat knew the danger. Subscribe, like, and listen to find out what really happened. The wail wasn't human. It sliced through the relative quiet of the gas station kiosk, overriding the howl of the blizzard outside and the low murmur of the coffee machine. Sal Moretti looked up, startled, as did the three customers huddled inside, seeking refuge from the treacherous Nevada night. All eyes went to Rusty, the ginger cat Sal had allowed in from the freezing cold. Rusty wasn't curled peacefully on his mat anymore. He was rigid, fur bristling along his spine, tail puffed to twice its size. His emerald eyes, usually calm and observant, were wide with unmistakable terror, fixed not on the humans, but on the closed storeroom door behind the counter. He yowled again, a rising frantic sound that scraped Sal's nerves raw. Then he launched himself at the door, scratching frantically at the wood, throwing his small body against it. "Hey, what's gotten into him?" asked the trucker, Mac, lowering his coffee cup. "Easy, Rusty. Easy, boy." Sal tried, reaching a hand out, but the cat ignored him. He ricocheted off the door, ran toward Sal, cried out again, a sound of pure panic, then darted back to the door, clawing and crying. The older woman of the stranded couple, Mrs. Miller, clutched her husband's arm. "That poor thing is terrified. What could it be?" Sal felt it too, a sudden cold dread mixing with confusion. This wasn't about wanting out. This was primal fear, urged by the cat's sheer desperation and the wide, anxious eyes of his customers. Sal fumbled for the storeroom key. "Maybe a coyote got trapped in the ventilation," he muttered, unlocking the door. He pulled it open. No coyote, just the familiar scent of stale oil, cardboard, and something else, something sharp, biting, invasive. Smoke. Thin gray tendrils snaked out from under the door frame, curling towards the ceiling. A wave of intense dry heat hit his face. Peering into the dimness past the shelves of antifreeze and wiper fluid, Sal saw it. An angry orange glow pulsing in the back corner near the main electrical panel. Flames were steadily consuming a pile of discarded rags, greedily licking at the wooden shelving above. A collective gasp sucked the air from the small kiosk. Mac cursed under his breath. Mrs. Miller stifled a scream. In that instant, everyone understood. The cat hadn't been crazy or spooked by the storm. He had been sounding a desperate alarm, warning them of the invisible danger creeping just feet away. The surprise wasn't just the fire. It was the small stray animal who had sensed it first, whose frantic actions had shattered the mundane silence and alerted them all to the imminent peril. The whole gas station, its handful of occupants frozen in shared shock, held its breath. The Desert Wind's Gas and Goods wasn't exactly a bustling hub. Perched on a lonely stretch of US 95 in western Nevada, it served mostly truckers hauling goods between Reno and Vegas, and the occasional lost tourist or local rancher. For Sal Moretti, 61 and widowed 5 years now, it was simply work. 15 years on the graveyard shift had etched lines of fatigue around his kind eyes and settled a quiet solitude deep in his bones. His kids were grown, living lives in cities that felt a world away. His small trailer behind the station and the steady rhythm of the night shift were the predictable anchors of his existence. He brewed coffee, stocked shelves, processed payments, and watched the immense star-dusted desert sky wheel slowly towards dawn, the silence broken only by the wind or the rumble of an approaching rig. Rusty arrived the previous spring, a scraggly, wary flash of ginger fur darting away from the dumpsters. Sal, initially indifferent, just another stray passing through, found himself leaving out the uneaten crusts of his nightly sandwich, then a saucer of water during the brutal summer heat. The cat remained elusive, but started appearing more regularly, watching Sal from a safe distance. Slowly, tentatively, Sal began talking to him during the empty hours, narrating the sparse events of his shift or sharing memories of his late wife Maria, who had loved animals. He never made a conscious decision to feed the cat properly, but one day he found himself buying a small bag of kibble during his weekly grocery run. Leaving a scoop out near the back door became part of his closing routine for the day shift. He started calling the cat Rusty. Over months, trust grew, measured in inches. Rusty stopped bolting when Sal stepped outside. He started waiting near the door when Sal's old Ford pickup arrived each evening. One cool autumn night, while Sal sat on the back step drinking coffee, Rusty hesitantly approached and, for the first time, rubbed against his leg, a low purr vibrating through his thin body. It was a small gesture, but it felt momentous, cracking open a door in Sal's carefully guarded solitude. He built Rusty a small shelter against the increasingly cold winds, using a sturdy box, some insulation scraps, and an old blanket. He knew it was against the rules set by Mr. Carmichael, the station's perpetually dissatisfied owner based in Reno, who only cared about the bottom line and whose emails always included reminders about Policy 7B, no unauthorized personnel or animals on premises. Sal kept the shelter hidden and never mentioned Rusty during his brief, impersonal check-in calls with management. As winter descended, bringing freezing temperatures and the threat of snow, Sal's concern for Rusty grew. The cat seemed thinner, his ginger coat less vibrant against the bleak landscape. Seeing him huddled miserably outside during a particularly vicious windstorm solidified something in Sal. This wasn't just about leaving out food anymore. It was about responsibility, about companionship. The inciting incident wasn't a single dramatic event, but this quiet culmination of shared meals and silent understanding. When the forecast predicted the season's first major blizzard, Sal knew he couldn't leave Rusty outside. He decided, consciously this time, to break the rules. Letting Rusty into the warmth of the kiosk that freezing night wasn't just an act of kindness. It was an acknowledgement of the bond they shared, a choice that set the stage for the chaos and surprising heroism to come. Life with Rusty, as an unofficial, mostly nocturnal resident, settled into a new routine. Sal became adept at managing his secret. Rusty quickly learned to stay quiet and out of sight, usually dozing in his box behind this counter whenever headlights approached or the bell above the door chimed announcing a customer. Sal kept a can of air freshener handy to mask any faint cat smell and diligently used a lint roller on his uniform before the day shift manager arrived. Their companionship deepened in the shared secrecy. Sal would quietly narrate the descriptions of passing cars or comment on the radio hosts, and Rusty would respond with slow blinks or a soft chirp, a silent conversation that filled the lonely hours. The primary complication remained Mr. Carmichael. His calls focused solely on sales figures, fuel margins, and reminding Sal to push the high-profit impulse buys near the register. Sal had tried months ago to report the increasingly frequent flickering of the lights in the back storeroom and the aging, cracked insulation he'd noticed on wiring near the circuit breaker panel. Carmichael had dismissed it. "Budget's tight, Sal. We're not replacing things until they actually break. Just keep an eye on it and try to upsell more coffee combos." The conversation left Sal feeling frustrated and powerless, the disregarded warning adding a layer of low-grade anxiety to his shifts. He started making a point of checking the storeroom more often, sniffing the air for any hint of electrical overheating, a habit born of unease. Further complicating Sal's quiet existence was the inherent vulnerability of the remote station. While mostly peaceful, occasional incidents reminded him of the risks. One night, a rough-looking pair in an old sedan tried to pay with a clearly counterfeit bill. When Sal calmly refused it, one of the men started getting aggressive, leaning over the counter menacingly. Just then, Rusty, disturbed by the raised voices, let out an unexpected, vicious hiss from his box behind the counter. The sudden, unseen sound startled the men, breaking the tension. They cursed, snatched back the fake bill, and stormed out. Sal wasn't sure if the cat had truly deterred them or if they'd just decided it wasn't worth the trouble. But he felt a surge of protectiveness towards his furry, unintentional bodyguard. Rusty wasn't just company. He was an alert presence in the often unsettling quiet. As January deepened, the predicted blizzard arrived with a vengeance. Snow swirled, driven by gale-force winds, making the highway treacherous. Sal knew travel would be minimal, but the conditions also meant anyone who was out might be forced to stop. Sure enough, around 10 p.m., an older couple, the Millers, pulled in, their sedan struggling in the drifts. They were hoping to reach Winnemucca, but were clearly shaken by the worsening storm. Sal offered them hot coffee and let them wait inside, hoping the plows would come through soon. An hour later, Mac, the trucker Sal knew well, arrived, parking his rig to wait out the worst of the storm. The small kiosk felt unusually crowded, the tension of the storm pressing in from outside. Sal, worried about Rusty being buffeted by the wind even in his improved shelter, made the decision. He slipped out the back, scooped up the shivering cat, and brought him inside, settling him on a mat behind the counter, hoping the customers wouldn't mind or notice too much. For a while, the scene was almost cozy. The storm raging outside, the low conversation of the stranded travelers, the smell of coffee, and the quiet presence of the ginger cat finally warm and safe. It was a fragile peace, soon to be shattered by Rusty's sudden, inexplicable panic and the horrifying discovery it would trigger in front of everyone. The ordinary night was about to become unforgettable. The shift from normalcy to crisis was terrifyingly swift. One moment, Rusty was a dozing orange lump behind the counter. The next, he was a screeching, clawing embodiment of feline panic, fixated on the storeroom door. His terror was infectious. The Millers exchanged wide-eyed, nervous glances. Mac put down his coffee, his easygoing demeanor replaced by sharp attention. "Something's spooked him bad, Sal." Sal's attempts to soothe the cat were useless. Rusty's cries were piercing, his actions frantic. When Mrs. Miller urged him to check the storeroom, Sal didn't hesitate long. Pushing down his own rising dread, he unlocked and pulled open the door. The sight and smell hit them all simultaneously. The acrid stench of smoke, the unnatural heat, and the hungry orange flames consuming the rags and climbing the shelving in the back corner. Mrs. Miller gasped, stumbling backward. Mac swore loudly, already moving towards the main exit. Sal felt a jolt of pure adrenaline. "Fire!" The word ripped from Sal's throat. "Everybody out, now!" His training, drilled into him years ago and thankfully never needed until this moment, took over. Even as the Millers scrambled for the door and Mac paused to make sure they were clear, Sal lunged for the red fire extinguisher. With practiced motions, he pulled the pin, aimed at the base of the flames. Simultaneously, his other hand slammed the emergency fuel pump shut-off. The abrupt silence outside was broken by the whoosh of the extinguisher discharging its chemical cloud into the storeroom. He sprayed furiously, choking on the powder, dimly aware of Mac yelling encouragement from the doorway, of Mrs. Miller crying outside, of Rusty, now a terrified orange streaks hiding behind Sal's legs. He emptied the extinguisher into the heart of the fire, beating back the flames just as they began to seriously catch the wooden shelves. The immediate danger subsided, leaving smoldering embers, thick smoke, and the acrid taste of chemicals in the air. Breathing heavily, heart pounding against his ribs, Sal backed out of the storeroom, pulling the door shut to contain the remaining smoke. He fumbled for his phone, dialing 911, his voice shaky as he reported the fire. The Millers and Mac huddled near the entrance, staring back towards the storeroom, their faces pale with shock. In the relative quiet that followed, punctuated only by the blizzard's howl and Sal's report to the dispatcher, the realization settled over all of them. They looked from the storeroom door to Sal, and then down to the ginger cat, still pressed against Sal's legs, trembling, but quiet now. If Rusty hadn't raised that frantic alarm, if Sal hadn't listened, if they hadn't investigated immediately, the fire could have easily reached the flammable solvents, or worse, spread unnoticed until the entire station was engulfed. This shared moment of understanding, the collective acknowledgement of the cat's incredible life-saving warning, was the turning point. Sal wasn't just a gas station attendant who'd put out a fire. He was the human partner to an animal hero. The dynamic within the small group shifted. They were no longer just strangers stranded together, but survivors of a near disaster, united by the surprising actions of a stray cat. Sal knew, looking at the wide, grateful eyes of the Millers and Mac's nod of respect, that he couldn't downplay Rusty's role. He had to protect the cat who had just protected them all. The arrival of the volunteer fire department truck, battling its way through the blizzard, brought organized procedure to the chaotic scene. Chief Evans, a name Sal recognized from town, took charge, his team quickly ensuring the fire was completely out, assessing the damage, and investigating the cause. They confirmed Sal's suspicion. The old, frayed wiring near the breaker panel had finally shorted out, exactly as Sal had feared and reported. Chief Evans took statements from everyone. Sal recounted the events, making sure to emphasize Rusty's crucial role. His account was strongly, almost vehemently corroborated by the Millers and Mac. "I'm telling you, Chief," Mac insisted, gesturing towards Rusty, who was now cautiously peering out from behind Sal's legs. "That cat went absolutely nuts before any of us smelled a thing. Sounded like he was being murdered. If Sal hadn't checked it out right then because of him, we'd all be toast." "Mrs. Miller nodded vigorously, adding, "He saved us. That little cat saved all of us." Chief Evans, a practical man not prone to sentimentality, listened intently, examined the scene, and nodded. Wiring matches Sal's report. Cat probably smelled the insulation smoldering before it fully ignited. Lucky for all of you, he raised such a ruckus. He included the details in his official report. The station, of course, was closed indefinitely pending electrical repairs and a safety inspection. The Millers, their car deemed unsafe to drive until daylight, gratefully accepted a ride into the nearest town with the departing fire crew. Mac decided to stay put in his rig until the roads cleared. Before leaving, he clapped Sal on the shoulder. "You take care of that cat, Sal. He's one in a million." Then came the call Sal dreaded. He reported the fire to Mr. Carmichael's office voicemail, including the detail about the electrical fault being the cause. Carmichael himself called back within the hour, his voice tight with controlled fury. "A fire, Moretti? Are you kidding me? Do you know what this is going to cost? The lost revenue? The insurance deductible?" Sal reiterated the cause was the faulty wiring he'd reported. Carmichael brushed it aside. "Irrelevant. You were on duty. And I heard from Chief Evans' office something about an animal being involved. You didn't have an animal inside the building, did you, Moretti?" After I explicitly forbade it, Sal took a breath. "Yes, sir. Rusty, the cat. It was freezing, blizzard conditions. I let him in. And he's the reason we caught the fire before it took down the whole station. Chief Evans' report will confirm that." "I don't give a damn what the report says," Carmichael roared. "You violated company policy. You endangered the property. That cat is a liability. I want it gone. Off my property. By the time I get my regional manager out there tomorrow to assess the damage, and you can consider this your final warning, Moretti. One more screw-up, and you're finished." He slammed the phone down. Sal felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. "Final warning. Get rid of Rusty." He looked at the ginger cat, who seemed to sense the tension pressing gently against its leg. Abandon him now, after what he'd done? It felt impossible. The praise from the chief, the gratitude from the Millers and Mac, it all felt validating, but it didn't change his precarious situation with Carmichael. Word traveled fast in the small communities connected by the highway. Over the next day, Sal's phone buzzed intermittently. Locals who knew him, other truckers who'd heard from Mac, Even Mrs. Miller called from her motel room, expressing concern and support. Someone dropped off a case of premium cat food. Another left a donation for Rusty's heroic deeds in the station's mail slot. This unexpected wave of community goodwill was baffling and heartwarming, but Sal knew it wouldn't sway Carmichael. He spent the day cleaning, worrying, and talking quietly to Rusty, preparing himself for the confrontation he knew was coming when the regional manager arrived. He felt cornered, facing the potential loss of his job and home, but his resolve not to betray Rusty solidified with every supportive phone call and every soft purr from the cat curled near the heater. The regional manager, a harried-looking man named Peterson, who clearly resented being dragged out to the middle of nowhere in the aftermath of a blizzard, arrived late the next afternoon. He did a cursory inspection of the damage, clipboard in hand, his expression sour. Sal stood by silently, waiting. Rusty watched from his box behind the counter, unusually still. "All right, Moretti," Peterson said finally, turning to Sal, his tone clipped. "Carmichael filled me in. The fire's bad enough, potential insurance nightmare, but this business with the cat, unacceptable. Clear violation of policy. Carmichael wants it gone, immediately, and frankly, after this incident, your position here is under review." He avoided making eye contact. Sal felt a familiar mix of resignation and defiance. "Mr. Peterson," he began, his voice steady, "that cat, Rusty, is the only reason this building is still standing. Ask Chief Evans. Ask the customers who were here. He saved lives, saved property. Company policy doesn't make exceptions for hero cats," Peterson retorted, though without much conviction. "Liability is liability. The cat has to go. That's the message from Mr. Carmichael. Either you arrange for animal control to pick it up or, well, Carmichael is considering termination." Just as Sal was about to reiterate his refusal, two vehicles pulled into the snowy lot. The first was Chief Evans' official fire department SUV. The second was the Channel 8 news van Sal had seen covering town events. Chief Evans got out, carrying a file, and the reporter, Paula Hayes, approached Peterson with her microphone. "Mr. Peterson?" Hayes asked brightly. "Paula Hayes, Channel 8. We're following up on the story of the Desert Wines gas fire and the reports that a cat bravely warned the attendant and customers. We heard the station management might be less than grateful, possibly even firing the attendant involved." Peterson looked trapped, blinking in the unexpected spotlight. Chief Evans stepped forward. "Mr. Peterson, I have the final fire report here. Confirms faulty wiring, previously reported by Mr. Moretti as the cause. It also officially notes the feline, Rusty, played a critical role in alerting occupants, likely preventing significant escalation and potential injuries." He handed Peterson a copy. Peterson's face cycled through annoyance, panic, and grudging acceptance. Firing a loyal employee after his life was saved by a cat he rescued, especially when the fire was due to company negligence noted in an official report, all potentially broadcast on the evening news. It was a PR disaster Carmichael wouldn't tolerate. He cleared his throat. Termination? No, that's a miscommunication. Of course, Mr. Moretti's job is secure. We appreciate his handling of the situation. He glanced towards Rusty, still watching intently, and the cat, naturally, will ensure it receives appropriate recognition, within regulations, of course. He beat a hasty retreat toward his car, muttering about calling Carmichael. Sal watched him go, feeling not triumphant, but profoundly relieved. He hadn't had to fight alone. Chief Evans gave him a wry smile. Paula Hayes turned to Sal, camera rolling. "Mr. Moretti, can you tell us about Rusty?" Sal looked down at the ginger cat, who chose that moment to emerge, stretch, and rub against his leg, purring loudly. The Channel 8 news story, featuring interviews with a grateful Sal, a supportive Chief Evans, and glowing testimonials from Mac and the Millers, contacted by phone, painted Rusty as a local hero. Carmichael, faced with overwhelmingly positive sentiment and the official report, had little choice but to quietly drop the issue. He even grudgingly approved Sal's request to use some petty cash to build a proper, warm cat house attached to the back of the storeroom, complete with a cat flap for access, satisfying regulations while acknowledging Rusty's new status. The Desert Wind's Gas and Goods reopened a week later, electrically sound and subtly changed. Rusty became its official, if unofficial, mascot. Truckers like Mac made a point of stopping by, often bringing treats or toys. Locals drove out just to catch a glimpse of the famous cat. Sal found himself engaging in more conversations than he had in years, sharing the story, accepting compliments for Rusty's bravery. His loneliness significantly lessened. The quiet hours were now filled with the soft sounds of Rusty purring nearby, the occasional playful bat at a dangling keychain, the shared ritual of meals, the fear and uncertainty after the fire forged an unbreakable bond between them. Sal still worked the graveyard shift, still watched the headlights approach across the desert, but the oppressive silence was gone, replaced by a quiet contentment and the steady presence of his small ginger hero. The gas station, brought to a standstill by fire, had found its warmth again, not just from the repaired heater, but from the surprising courage of a stray cat and the quiet kindness of the man who shared his meals with him